This is every manipulator in Hunter x Hunter ranked by a man on the internet, and we are starting with Base, who is a very good base of a manipulator with her ability Instant Lover. Anyone kissed by Base becomes immediately infatuated with her, morphing into a type of love slave who will take her command for 3 hours. Pretty basic manipulation here. Simple condition, little bit of control, short period of time. It's an ability that's actually pretty overpowered at lower levels, specifically on those who aren't Nen users think that kind of low level. At higher levels, however, this ability becomes pretty nigh on useless, because Nen veterans aren't just going to let someone kiss them, even if it's someone of, how shall we say, Base's physical persuasions. OP early game power, but terrible late game power, which is going to land Base smack bang in the middle with a B tier. Next up we have Boki, someone who we know so little about that his abilities and power section on the Hunter x Hunter wiki is one line which reads as follows. As a chimera ant, Boki is already stronger than the average human. That is an excellent in-depth analysis right there. But Boki, to be fair, he's also pretty standard. Manipulation as a whole is a very tried and tested field. You encounter a lot of the same sorts of conditions that achieve the same sorts of results. In Boki's case, he equips a device to a target and is then able to manipulate them using a game controller. It's unknown whether he can control more than one person at a time, in some sort of two-player mode, I suppose. All in all though, Boki may indeed be stronger than the average human, but when it comes to manipulation, he is nothing but average. And as a result, he would be joining Base in the B tier. Next up is Icalgo, who takes on a more left field version of manipulation. That is, if we picture just left of our field being the graveyard, because Icalgo engages in the morbid practice of corpse manipulation from the inside. It's a gruesome but actually quite rare form of manipulation, because whilst in the body, Icalgo can use the Nen ability of the corpse, which is crazy because unless post-mortem Nen is involved, the Hatsu should vanish from the corpse when the target dies. So Icalgo actually functions as a more macabre form of crawler. In fact, if he so desired, Icalgo could construct a body preservation facility and even build his own library of Nen abilities that he can just slip in and out of. You know, come to think of it, it's so rare that we actually see Nen users being manipulated themselves. It's usually like a standard non-Nen using person. So I don't know if it's normal to be able to use their powers or command them to use their Hatsu. And in a weird way, it's kind of like a forced activation in post-mortem Nen to briefly resurrect an ability for your own personal use. And for that factor alone, Icalgo skyrockets as a manipulator and lands straight in the A tier, is what I would like to say. However, Icalgo is not a manipulator. According to Togashi's memo, Icalgo is actually an enhancer, despite being branded as a manipulator in the databook and also displaying all of the behaviors of a manipulator. So apologies, Mr. Octopus, but you're not actually allowed to be ranked on this list. But I wanted to talk about him anyway because he has a pretty interesting use of manipulation. Anyway, to the poster boy of manipulation, and honestly a man who carries this entire category on his rather slender yet malleable shoulders, Ilimi Zoldyck is manipulation perfected. He's worked out a system to achieve maximum output with minimal input. I mean, the dude can create an entire army of manipulated people, whereas the standard in this affinity is control of 1, maybe 2 people at a time if you're really skilled. But to that, Ilimi says, nah bruh, I'm gonna just take all the people. I can currently only think of one character in the series who has manipulated more humans than Ilimi has, with a Nen ability that is. There are characters like Pariston who just manipulate the whole world, but that's a different thing. But I also can't think of any other character who has manipulated more than 2 humans at a time, which I think makes this decision fairly simple, as Ilimi is a definite S tier. But another Zoldyck has appeared, and get used to it, because we'll be seeing a lot of those today, but this is Kalito, the first manipulator we're meeting whose abilities don't focus on controlling people. Because manipulation is such a broad concept, you could use it on anything. Objects, substances, abstract concepts like music. But despite that, the overwhelming amount of users get funneled into controlling people. Not Kalito though. He instead chooses to manipulate paper, very, very deadly paper, as if even a single piece gets stuck to an opponent, then all of the papers will target that same area and death via extreme paper cut will almost certainly occur. Kalito also has this very sneaky ability to surveil people using paper cutouts, so sneaky that even the Phantom Troop did not pick up on it. And whilst not the paragon of this affinity that his older brother is, Kalito is disgustingly talented for a 10 to 12-year-old and is an easy A tier. Moving now to Amane, but not that Amane. There are actually 2 Amanes in Hunter x Hunter, and you've probably never heard of this one, and that's for good reason. Because this Amane comes to us courtesy of Hunter x Hunter Altar of the Dragon Veil, a game for the PlayStation 2, which features a very blue-haired 1999 3D rendered Hisoka. Amane is like a sub-villain of the game, but a pretty incredibly powerful one. His ability is called Trembling Melody, whereby Amane rings a little bell, and those who hear the sound of said bell are able to be controlled. And that is ridiculously overpowered. It very much breaks the rules of Nen. But in addition, it can also control both living people and dead bodies. Manipulators usually need to choose one or the other. But as some form of restriction, Amane can only control up to 2 people people at once, but the power is still pretty incredibly broken, and if he did actually exist in the world, it would be right up there in the S tier. Meanwhile, we now have Zoldyck Mama Kikyo, someone only identified as a manipulator through the Hunter x Hunter databook. Kikyo has yet to show us anything, literally anything, with the exception of the 1999 anime, which alluded to some sort of ability to do with Kikyo's vision, as her visor would change color or even cut to static in response to Kikyo's emotions at the time. As a Zoldyck, even one who married into the family, I'm gonna have to give Kikyo some respect, because she's definitely not going to be a bad manipulator. But without knowing anything else so far, I think the best we can do right now is plonk her straight in the sea. Now I believe it's Leech O'Clock featuring Leech, the shadow beast who serves as a fantastic example of how to squander your innate magical abilities. Leech manipulates leeches. That's it. That's the ability. Which is interesting because it means that his entire ability is like the activation requirement of most abilities. I feel like a more veteran Nen user would structure this leech insertion as a condition to manipulate the opponent. Kind of like what Boki, Sharnock, and Illumi do with their antennae and needles respectively. But Leech is pretty happy stopping halfway, but we are not happy. And so he's going to get smacked with a great big disappointing D. And now for the Zoldyck who most aesthetically resembles Leech. Here is a piggy. Milky is actually a really difficult character to rank because like Kikyo, he hasn't shown us anything, but unlike Kikyo, we know that Milky is a world-class trained assassin. In fact, apart from his anime sex dolls, the only thing Milky did show us was a bit of a manga exclusive, where he was introduced smoking a cigar very Bond villain style, and even putting that cigar out on Killua's chest. I'm going to give Milky more credit than Kikyo. He is a piggy, but he is a powerful piggy, and so he's going to sit in the waiting room of mid that is the B tier. To someone who is anything but mid, next up is Moral, one of the best general Nen users in the series. But we're not looking for the best general Nen user. I want the best manipulator, and I just don't think that's Moral. Moral's Deep Purple relies far too heavily on two other affinities, whilst only applying a layer of manipulation on at the very end, like a coat of lacquer on a smoky chair. This does, however, make him extremely versatile, so versatile that the Hunter x Hunter Mabuga card game features him making a kebab, which makes me hungry. Moral is best described as a utility manipulator. He only really dives into his affinity at a surface level because his interests lay elsewhere. And that's fine, especially since that surface level dive still significantly outranks most manipulators and is still going to land Moral in a very respectable A tier. Ponzu is a character that also exists, or did exist past tense. Despite not becoming a hunter, she tagged along with Pockle and learned a bit of the old Nen, specializing in bee manipulation. So kind of like Leech, but much more better, because the bees were capable of taking complex commands, and so Ponzu lands quite safely in the sea. But everyone please give a round of applause for Sancho! Yeah! Woohoo, it's Sancho. Because he has won the award of Worst Manipulator on the list today. Sancho is a character from Hunter x Hunter Each One's Determination, which is better known as the game where Kurapika wears a very pretty dress. And Sancho is a manipulator who fights very Joseph Joestar style, using enhanced clackers with no tangible evidence of manipulation at all. And whenever a user ignores their own natural affinity, well, there's only one place for them to go, which means we need to open up the Castro tier. So hop in the bin, you naughty manipulator, and you think about what you've done, or more accurately, what you've not done, which is manipulate. But here is our true heavy hitter of the video. Shiapoof is up next, and if Illumi is the poster boy of manipulation, then Shiapoof is his talent producer behind the scenes, manipulating Illumi for profit. Shiapoof's abilities may as well have no limits. He can control armies of people, he can read your emotions, he can transform his body into any shape. In fact, he can just transform into however many bodies it is that he wants. He can even cocoon people up and gift them Nen abilities. He's such a potent manipulator that the S tier is too low for him, which is why in Shiapoof's honor, we are going to open up the very special violin tier for him to reside in. Troop Time now, and Shalnock is honestly a fairly disappointing candidate, but only when compared to Shiapoof, because Black Voice is about as good as you can really hope to get as a manipulator. Being able to control up to two people at the same time with complex commands is pretty good. And also even control yourself to the point where you become a Super Saiyan, an exquisite specimen of manipulation, and so Shalnock must be an S. To someone equally as currently dead as Shalnock, we also have Shikaku, someone who had this very fascinating power to turn the abilities of others into cards, and then potentially even steal and wield them. I don't know, and to be honest, we may never know. What I do know is that this is not manipulation, and if it wasn't specifically stated in the series, then I would have thought that Shikaku was a specialist. So into the Castro bin you go. Shoot McMahon is also here, and look, he's a bit of a weird manipulator. I mean, Shoot's a bit weird in general, because he has 3 entirely separate Hatsu, but none of them, synergize with each other. Hotel Rafelsia, the disembodied hands, and the power to weirdly insert things into Shoot's own hands are a good example of someone spreading themselves a bit too thin. The really weird thing is that Shoot can't even use the disembodied hands as a condition to activate Hotel Rafelsia, which activates when hands touch opponents, but they need to be Shoot's hands that are attached to him. So at most, all his floaty hands can do is serve as a bit of a distraction. He's an alright Nen user, but not an amazing manipulator, probably even below average, and so we're gonna mark Shoot with a C. Sodom is an interesting fellow who we know nothing about yet, so D tier, I don't want to deal with you. And then there's Squala, who practice dog manipulation. I would personally love this ability. It's a great excuse to have so many dogs, all of the dogs, on the condition that you need to take care of them. Mate, sign me up. Although in the grand scheme of manipulation, it's not amazing. In fact, it's really not amazing, and I can't bring myself to put this anywhere but the D tier. To dessert, I now serve you a Zakuro Custard, a really cool blood manipulator, specifically of his own blood, which is a really hard condition. And as a result, it comes with some pretty amazing power. In addition to deadly bloods, he can even create little conscious bloodlets that roam around and give Zakuro information. Even so, it's still pretty middling. The whole needing to use your own blood makes it very difficult. So I think that Zakuro is a plain old B. Our final Chimera and candidate comes in the form of Zarzan, who is ridiculous, utterly ridiculous, as Queen Shot doesn't just take control of someone, but it transforms humans into permanent animal hybrid slaves. That is a really big thing for manipulation, because most control is only temporary or involves killing the person in question. This, however, is a one-shot recipe for eternal slavery. There is a condition that the human targeted needs to be strong enough to survive the brutal transformation, but if anything, that only works in Zarzan's favor, ensuring that she only receives the strongest of slaves. Plus, she has her own body transformation as well, and look, if it weren't for Shiapoof, then Zarzan would potentially be the greatest manipulator. But as it is, I think she slots quite nicely into the S tier. We now have but one manipulator left. So is the best still to come? Well, it's Zushi, so no, because he's a manipulator who can't even manipulate yet, so we're going to temporarily store him in the Castro tier. And that is every manipulator in Hunter x Hunter ranked arbitrarily by a man on the internet.